On the show this week, we give our first impression of Isuzu's competitively priced new SUV, the MU-X. Also on the show, we drive the most expensive and the most exclusive Ford in the world, the GT, on both road and track. And also venture off-road in the new Jeep Comapss.
Now this right here is the Isuzu MU-X. It's the long-awaited sequel to the MU-7, the car that originally launched Isuzu in India all those years ago. Now that car, when it was launched, already felt a bit behind the competition, and with newer competition like the new Endeavour and Fortuner launched, this car couldn't have come a minute sooner. It's also based on the D-Max V-Cross, a car we really like a lot. So, suffice to say, we can't wait to see what it's all about. The MU-X is, of course, based on the D-Max V-Cross pickup, but also on the Chevrolet Trailblazer, and its look is a mix of both. The front end is very close to that of the V-Cross, with a similarly massive chrome grille. But what's new is a more aggressive contrast-colored bumper with LED daytime running lamps. And while the rear may be similar in shape to the Chevy with its blacked-out D-pillar, Isuzu's wraparound tail lamps give it a distinct look. Also really attractive are the multi-spoke 17-inch alloy wheels. Their design is really smart, and the thick 65 profile tires complement the tough look nicely under the immense wheel arches. Overall, the MU-X has a strong SUV stance, but it is a bit unexciting to look at. Climb up into the cabin and you'll find a dashboard similar to the D-Max, but with a few differences. There's a glossy black finish for the center console and silver accents on the steering wheel, which has many more control buttons. There's even some nice cushioning on the armrests and door pads. Fit and finish is pretty tight and the design is very neat, but it doesn't feel like a sufficient step up over the D-Max, and for this price we'd have expected better. The equipment list is decent too, with leather upholstery, a powered driver's seat, keyless entry and go, a rear view camera, ISOFIX mounting points, cruise control, and even a 7-inch touchscreen. But even this doesn't feel on the same level as rivals. The touchscreen, for instance, feels really basic and doesn't feature smartphone integration. Before we get moving, let's quickly have a look into the third row of seats. And really, it's a pleasant surprise. The middle seat tumbles forward at the pull of a lever, and after a bit of a hike into the back, you'll find that space and comfort are great by most SUV third row standards. Even two adults wouldn't mind sitting here over short distances. But bear in mind that with all rows in place, boot volume isn't huge. And with that, let's hit the road. Now powering the Isuzu MU-X is a 3-litre 4-cylinder turbo diesel engine that makes about 177 horsepower and 380 Newton meters of torque. Now 380 Newton meters, that is the figure to bear in mind, because it is considerably lower than what you get from most rivals. They're all in the 400 plus range. And that's what really matters in a big SUV like this. You need torque more than outright power to get it moving at low speeds and move the load of both the vehicle and whatever it's carrying. And you notice the slight torque deficit when you really smash your foot down. What you get is a lot of noise, but not a whole lot of progress. This is also largely to do with the gearbox, a 5-speed automatic which is standard across the range. This is a car that prefers to be driven gently with a light foot, and as long as you don't ask for too much of it, it will make smooth progress. The 5-speed gearbox too, when you press down lightly, it shifts smoothly. The moment you kick down hard for an overtake, it gets a bit lost and doesn't know exactly what to do with itself. It's actually not that slow, clocking 0 to 100 kph in a reasonable 12.6 seconds. But it's the tremendous noise and strain from the engine when accelerating that makes it feel really labored. The other thing about this engine is that it's not very refined. It's only at idle and very low revs that it seems a bit quiet. The moment you extend it past 2000 RPM, it starts to make quite a bit of a racket, and it's really not what you want in a plush premium SUV like this. Say when you cross a speed breaker like I just did and you're at very low revs, it makes a huge din while it picks up the pace again. Now really, one cannot expect a lot in the way of handling from a big ladder frame SUV like this, so it's really best not to keep your expectations too high. It's got a heavy steering that's quite a bit of effort at low to parking speeds. It does weigh up well when you go faster, but it still doesn't offer you a whole lot of confidence. That's because it suffers from steering shock, and that means it goes through bumps and potholes and shakes around and shimmies in your hand. So it never really gives you a secure feeling when you're going around corners or over rough roads. As expected, there is a lot of body roll around corners, and the tires tend to squeal in protest from all the mass involved. So again, like with the engine and gearbox, it's best not to drive this car in a hurry. Though it's a big, tough SUV, here in India it's more likely to be chauffeur-driven or used as a family car. So it's important to know what the experience is like from the middle row as well. Now actually one of the big selling points of this car should be the middle row seat, and that's because it's so spacious and comfortable. The seat itself is really plush and well cushioned. I've got decent thigh support, nice back support, and look at the amount of legroom. Jay, who's driving, is well over 6 feet tall, and I've still got plenty of space here. Headroom, of course, is plentiful, and the windows are really big for a nice view out. There are AC vents in the roof, and I can even recline the backrest quite a bit if I want to. But what's sure to be a treat for people who like traveling long distances is this roof-mounted screen. It's a 10-inch screen that plays movies, I believe, via DVD from the front, and that's sure to keep your kids and family members entertained in the backseat. Now the MUX's suspension has been set up very soft, and while that means at low speeds you get this lovely pillowy ride that just steamrolls over just about everything, the moment you pick up the pace even slightly, you start to get jiggled and tossed about in the back seat. What's more, if you go through a big sharp bump, it really thuds through hard and you will get rocked about wherever you sit. So as with the engine and the gearbox, it's best to drive this car at a very measured pace if you want to get the most comfortable experience out of it. Thanks to its high ground clearance, good approach and departure angles, chunky tires and simple but robust 4x4 system with low range, the MUX is quite superb off-road. It handled these dirt tracks without flinching, and even when we later took it for a serious rock crawl, it did so with little fuss. So yes, if you're one of the few that uses their SUV off-road, the big Isuzu will not disappoint. Now before we go any further, I need to tell you about the MUX's price. It costs 23.9 lakh rupees ex-showroom for the 4x2 version and 25.9 lakh rupees for this 4x4, and that is considerably cheaper than any of the competition. What you get for your money is a big, rugged off-roader that can take you anywhere, that's packed with 7 leather-wrapped seats and pretty much all the creature comforts you could ask for. Yes, it does feel a bit behind the more modern competition in a few areas, but you have to admit that for the money, it packs in just about everything you could ask for from your big family SUV.
Now about 6,800 very rich people are queuing up with a check of $450,000 to buy a Ford. Now we all know the blue oval sits on the bonnet of some very humble cars like the Figo, Icon, EcoSport, but the car I'm about to drive today is no ordinary Ford. It's the iconic Ford GT, which has a reputation of slaying supercars. And I'm going to find out just how quick it is on track and then the road. It's a nice cozy fit.
It is. On the straightaway, back to third. Okay, it's going to tighten up, so watch your speed.
The mid-mounted 3.5-litre V6 engine is shoved as far forward as possible and is just inches away from my helmet. and again feels race car-like with its raw mechanical noise and hissing turbos. But to be honest, the GT's engine note is the biggest disappointment. It's hard to make a V6 sound like a V8, especially if it's turbocharged. Sure, the engine is loud, but the note isn't sweet or refined and is more a cacophony of sounds. What is sweet though is the monstrous 647 horsepower and a tidal wave of torque that ensures you won't ever complain about performance. There's no turbo lag to speak of, and the first prod of the throttle pedal slams my helmet back into the seat. The GT is bloody fast and rockets from corner to corner with a ferocity that makes the 0 to 100 time of 2.9 seconds completely believable.
I'll just be on call. Have Chuck give me a phone on the radio. I'll come run up.
It's completely insane.
Yeah, we literally had dropped for our last lap.
Can't imagine a car can go so quickly on a track. So I'm just blown away. I think my kidneys are somewhere, my brain is somewhere else, all those G-forces. Oh, I don't think I have driven any street legal car so quickly. In fact, this car should be illegal. So that was an amazing 5 laps on the track. But what's the Ford GT like on the road? I'm going to get into this car and find out. But before I do that, let's just take a look at it. It looks incredibly fast just standing still. And the beauty of this design is that it leans so much on tradition. Look at these front nostrils, which are reminiscent of the 66 GT40, the one that won Le Mans, the shark nose front. But I think the real talking point is the aero of the car. Just look at the way the car tapers towards the rear. And you've got this really cool detail over here where there's air going in here into the intercoolers, and there's air being funneled up and going straight into the engine. So not only does this look pretty good, it's got a functional element as well. Now let's move to the rear, because again, it really looks awesome. I just love these two huge exhausts just sticking out of the back. And again, just looking at the car from the rear, you can just see it's like a Coke bottle over here. Extremely narrow towards the rear. And that engine, the mid-engine, the V6, now Ford said they had to use a V6 because anything bigger wouldn't fit. They wanted to shove the engine right up front as much as possible to get a lower polar moment of inertia to make it as well balanced as possible. So really a very functional design, and it's all about A to B speed. But now I'm going to jump in and tell you what it's like on normal roads. Butterfly doors, they look fantastic, don't they? So the cabin again is really very functional. It's really very business-like. The seats, they don't even slide forward because Ford didn't want to have that extra mechanism because it would have compromised the cabin space. Instead, what happens is that the steering wheel comes to you and even the pedals move closer to you. So that's the way drivers can get comfortable. Again, the interior carbon fiber all around really looks the business. But what I really love is the steering wheel. All controls are on the steering wheel, which means you never have to take your hand off the wheel. And given the speeds this car is capable of, I think that's quite sensible. The other thing is that the cabin is really narrow. You've got this very slim center console over here, so you're very, very close to the passenger. So if you have a waist of more than 42, better be careful, you'll be rubbing stomachs. And though this is a supercar, they haven't forgotten a few touches of practicality. You have a cup holder here. You can't sell a car in America without one. And in this smartphone age, you can't do with USB ports either. The Ford GT has 2 of them. Okay, I'm ready to go. Toggle the thumb wheel on the steering to sport or normal mode, and the GT suddenly rises 50 millimeters, preparing itself for the world outside a racetrack. But even raised to its maximum ride height, the GT still feels very hunkered down. Ford has really nailed it with the suspension. I mean, it's hard to believe how compliant this is. I mean, it's as much at home on the road as well as the track. Even small dabs on the throttle pin you back and you get accustomed to the brutal acceleration. But it's not the power, but the chassis and aerodynamics which are the true heroes of the show. The hydraulic steering has a seminal feel. The steering is just unbelievable. You've got that old school hydraulic feel. It's quick off center. It's sharp. It's absolutely precise. You can place this car exactly where you want it to go. It's the way the steering weights up progressively that encourages you to lean deeper into corners. But I'm still just scratching the surface of the GT's dynamic capabilities. I mean, it just dives deeper and deeper into corners. You get so much confidence with every kilometer. The fluency with which it changes direction lets you build up a joyful rhythm that makes driving the GT an absolute delight. Over undulations, off-camber bits and the odd rough patch, the GT is utterly stable. And it is very predictable for a mid-engine car. The ride is pretty impressive too, and in comfort mode feels surprisingly pliant. What an unbelievable day it's been, and I can tell you, I don't think I've driven a car that is so honed for speed like this one. The handling is just absolutely brilliant, be it on the track, be it on the roads, and you really get the feeling that this car has been designed to go really fast A to B. It is really a weapon for speed. And what really makes it special is that what Ford have really done with this car has a lot of future tech, but at the same time it leans heavily on tradition. It's racing tradition. You can see that in the looks, and you can just see that in the character of the car. Now, this car may not have the flamboyance of the Italians, and I think even the engine note of the V6, well, that really doesn't sing the way I would like it to. But otherwise, this car is at a completely different level. And just to end on a bit of a sad note, this car will not be made in right-hand drive, which means even if you can afford it, you really can't have it in India. So, dream on.
Well, you've already seen our test drive of the new Compass that's all set to be launched, but we've decided to give it a more rigorous workout. We're headed off to the Netravati Wildlife Sanctuary just outside Goa to put it in its natural environment, off-road, and put it through its paces. Now, I know some of you have seen the whole review and felt it was a little overkill, but I have to agree with Shapur. Once you get in this car and behind its wheel, it begins to grow on you in many different ways. The interiors impress straight off and do feel premium enough. Fit and finish is also really good, and it does come with its fair share of features. But the list is not as comprehensive as some of the competition. What we did miss most was the navigation, especially since Apple CarPlay does not support maps. And a lot of people will also expect a sunroof. Though global cars have it, it is missing in India, and engineers tell us that if the requests are enough, they can offer a variant with a sunroof almost immediately. We headed to the outskirts of Goa, and the more I drove, the more I enjoyed the Compass. The diesel engine runs smoothly and packs in enough punch to make you smile. The gearbox needs a bit of a heavy hand, especially shifting to second, but it's not to the point of being a bother. It's just heavier than others. Now, we've been driving an hour and a half or so out of Goa, and first we went through the narrow lanes of Goa, weaving through traffic, then we were out on the highway, and now we're on this nice, twisty, windy section of road that leads up to the Netravati Wildlife Sanctuary. So it's given me a good experience of what the Compass is like in quite a few conditions, and I have to say it's made a good companion so far. It's impressed me, actually. You can amble around easily and weave through traffic. There were times when I was in third gear at 1000 RPM, and all I had to do was put my foot down and it would get a move on easily. And then cruising out on the highway, it just breathes so easily, gets up to speed quickly, cruises comfortably, and it feels so stable and planted. The steering gives you a good sense of security, and the ride quality is actually quite shattering. You can come up on potholes, deep ruts, and it just dismisses them with aplomb. You really don't feel much going on underneath the tires.
And you know, because it had this nice soft pliancy to the ride, I was wondering what it would be around corners. But this has impressed me even here. Quick changes of direction, body roll is so well contained, you can carry a fair amount of speed around the corners. The steering feels good, there's a nice heft to it, and you can really have fun.
So far, the Compass was ticking off all the right boxes and had made the 2-hour journey pretty effortless. The word Jeep, however, makes you imagine rugged terrain. And the thing to know is, if you're looking to buy one for that reason, is that at launch, the 4x4 option will only be offered on the diesel variant. The petrol manual will get it next, and the petrol auto last. We dived into the forest, turning the terrain select dial to mud, and hit the trail to find out how well the 4x4 on our diesel variant worked.
And of course, the rains allowed us a whole load more of fun. We threw everything at it. Logs, rocks, steep inclines, declines, slush, muck, and it handled it all beautifully. But why am I speaking? Let the visuals speak for themselves.
There was always enough torque to clamber up gradients, even on a gentle throttle. Driving through the slushy bits, you could feel the system working, shifting power to the wheels that needed traction, and we sailed smoothly through. Now here's a fact that people should know, because there's been discussion on ground clearance these days. And though the lowest point on the Compass is actually 208 millimeters off the ground, the figure you will see on paper is probably 153 millimeters. That's because the Indian certification norms have changed and now require a vehicle of this size to have a 400 kilogram of load before being measured up. All I can say is don't go by those numbers. The Compass does just fine. We never had a problem going over any of the stones along the way or wading through the waterbed. Now, this short second review may come across as all positive too. But the Compass is a vehicle that will steal your heart quite easily, whether it's the way it looks, the interior quality, the way it drives, or just the shatteringly good ride.
Now, after having spent a day with the Jeep Compass and putting it through its paces on-road and off-road, I have to say I'm impressed. And I could give you a long list of reasons why, but I think the best way to put it is that this is a car I'd like to buy myself.